Andy Bitter, TechSideline.com covers the Hokies. Andy, thanks so much for hopping on the show here on 365 Sports. We had Manny Navarro on from The Athletic earlier, kind of giving the Miami perspective of this and the ACC. It was a strange start to the week with all of that going on. And how did you feel covering it and seeing Virginia Tech's place in it, in that this is one of the few teams that in the ACC that's actually won it fairly recently, so they've got some sway, but in this world of conference realignment, they're just not a team that's ever been talked about nationally. So where do you think they sit as they look at themselves long-term in the ACC that's stuck together for at least 13 more years?
Yeah, it's hard to say. They show up in that, so-called Magnificent Seven, how Brett McMurphy called them, which is a ridiculous name, but, they're not quite like some of the schools at the top, where you're talking about Clemson and North Carolina and Florida State and Miami, probably even in terms of, if you were a free agent and were out there, would somebody snap you up pretty quickly? And I think so with the majority of those schools, if not all of them. I think it's less certain when you're talking about Virginia Tech and NC State and Virginia, and you get to the next group. And yeah, Virginia is a capped market in terms of cable households, but this whole realignment round hasn't really been about cable households necessarily. It's been about brands. So I think if you're the Hokies, you maybe need to watch your step a little bit here, because you don't want to leave behind something in the ACC that's not horrible. I know what everybody's making it out to be right now. It's not horrible. For something that might not be that much better. If you don't get that golden ticket to the Big Ten or the SEC, what are you doing? Why are you leaving the ACC in the first place, or even thinking about it? So they're sort of in a precarious position, because this isn't the program that it was around 2000 or even 2010. It's been struggling for a lot of the last decade here, and the luster is a little bit off. The shine is off the program, I should say, a little bit.
Yeah, Andy, I saw in one of those articles where it was even mentioned by one of those unnamed folks of I don't even know that if every school being mentioned even knows they have a landing spot anywhere else. It's just, very much barking, and that can be a dangerous game to play. And I would imagine that Virginia Tech was probably one of those schools that might not know where they would even go if that were to be the case. So it settled down by the end of Monday, as you saw. What was just sort of the feeling coming out of those ACC meetings? Does it feel like everything's normal, or does it feel like everybody's going to be kind of walking on pins and needles, looking over their shoulder a little bit here moving forward?
Yeah, it doesn't feel normal. And despite the, messages of unity, it's not unified. They didn't come out with an official message of unity, which is probably good, because it would have been BS. There's no way that they are if half the league is looking at the grant of rights. The fact of the matter is they're stuck together because of the grant of rights. Nobody has a good way to get out of that. Legally, it's never been challenged. Even with Texas and Oklahoma, they waited till there was 1 year left before they negotiated an exit. We're talking about 13 years left on the ACC's grant of rights. That's going to be one heck of a legal battle if anybody ever tries to challenge it. There's been talks of, could they dissolve the ACC if they get enough members? Nobody even knows how many it would take. And if they did, like we said before, where's the landing spot? You're not doing that to get into the Big 12. You're doing that to get into the SEC and the Big Ten, and I don't think there are enough seats at the table if that's the case. So it's sort of this, strange grouping of teams that are stuck together because there's no better option. If there was a better option, somebody would have utilized it by now. So that's why, the timing of that story coming out right before the ACC meetings at a time when some schools are going to be pushing for unequal revenue, I think it was just trying to gain leverage in that whole argument and trying to get it so there's a little bit unequal distribution of the revenue that's coming in. And, I guess to their credit that they're looking toward that. They're getting that. So I think it was a lot of saber rattling about nothing because, if they could leave the conference, they would right now. And they haven't because they can't.
Andy, where do you think Virginia Tech, after they're part of this, sees themselves as a possibility of getting some of that merit-based revenue?
At its height, once it got in, it won the ACC 4 times in 7 years. Mm-hmm. And if you do that coming up and what the new playoff system is going to be, you'll be playing in the postseason. The problem is the last time they did that was 2010. We're talking about 12 years that they haven't even been in that conversation. They've played in one ACC title game since 2012. That was in the 2016 season when Justin Fuente first got there. They had a pretty good team that year, but that's been it. That's the only 10-win season in the last decade plus. They just have not been a program on that level. And last year, they bottomed out. They went 3-8. Had a game cancellation at the end of the year, possibly could have gone 4-8, but that's still unusual. That's the worst record here in 30 years. So, they're talking about, revenue splits that's going to be different for the high achieving teams. I mean, Virginia Tech has not been on that level for a long time, which is why I think it's kind of funny that Florida State has been pushing so hard for it. Florida State's been terrible the last 5 or 6 years. They've actually been worse during the regular season than Virginia Tech. So they're, I know they're trending up and they should be a good team coming up, but I found that kind of rich. But in terms of the Hokies, this is maybe coming at not the greatest time for them because the program has been on the skids here for a while. But I think they look at themselves and they go, hey, we have the infrastructure. We have the coach they believe now in place to get this thing turned around. They just have to go on the field and do it.
Man, you saying 12 years since their last? I mean, I won't speak for you, Andy, but that makes me feel really old. I think it feels like Virginia Tech was, making headlines like 5 years ago. But man, it has been a while longer than that. It really has. But do you feel like they have the right guy there in Brent Pry? I mean, does it feel across the fan base as though there's positive momentum moving forward despite last year's 3-8 record, as you mentioned? Where is just kind of the mindset of the Hokie fan base right now?
It's sort of in a state of confusion about what exactly to think of this new coaching staff. I think everything that Brent Pry has done off the field in terms of engagement with fans, engagement in recruiting, zest for recruiting, he just sort of has that knack for it and this ability to relate with people. And, that extends to high school coaches and recruits. I think that part is going well. I think you'll start to see some dividends on that front. I don't know if they're ever going to be a major player in recruiting because there's so much more to it now with NIL stuff involved. I don't really know how you judge a recruiter in this day and age, but I think the relationships part of it he's very good with, and making that connection with the fans that they felt was lacking under Justin Fuente. It's the on-field part of it that I have to wait and see, and I didn't see a whole lot of it last year that was too encouraging. They were a mess offensively. Brent Pry's specialty is defense. I think that part of the game will be okay. They made some changes on the offensive staff this offseason, put even more on offensive coordinator Tyler Bowen's plate. So they're really doubling down on this guy who's a 33-year-old, first-time Power 5 offensive coordinator whose offense last year was ranked 119th in the country. There's a lot they need to improve on that side of the ball for me to have faith that Brent Pry is the right guy. Now, they've added a bunch of transfers, and we'll see. Maybe just lack of talent was the biggest problem last year, and it certainly was a problem. I don't know if it was the only problem. I need to see a bit more on the field in terms of this thing turning around before I believe that Pry is the guy.
Andy, just a local question here. Chiron Drones transferred from Baylor to Virginia Tech. He's part of that quarterback battle. Where do you see that ending up when it finally comes out in the fall?
Coming out of the spring, my money's on Grant Well still. He's the guy that was ahead. They basically said if they played a game now, he would be the starter, but Drones would play in some capacity. And I don't know if that's an endorsement of a 2-quarterback system going forward, or that's just something you say in the spring to keep everybody engaged and involved in the competition. But I think he's got some work to do to catch up. But now he's new, and he's only went through 15 spring practices, and there's still, almost 100 days until the season opener. So I could see that changing if he makes some big strides. But I think there's some mechanical things he needs to refine. I think there's some accuracy and then just learning the system things that he needs to make strides in before he can be considered a guy they put on the field for more than just a few series in a game. But, he still has, I think, 3 years of eligibility left, including this season. So it's not like he has to come in and start right away for that to be a valuable pickup. I think long-term, they still really like what he can bring to the table.
Andy Bitter, TechSideline.com. Andy, thanks for hopping on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Andy Bitter, TechSideline.com. But Virginia Tech, look, that was